Our bedtime lesson is about winter tonight. Winter in the UK is typically the coldest season, with the shortest days often accompanied by the unsettled weather conditions. Now there are 4 parts to this lesson. Our first part is, when does winter start? How you define the first day of winter depends on whether you are referring to the astronomical or meteorological calendar, winter. The day in our calendar that marks the first day of winter usually refers to the astronomical seasons which are a result of the Earth's axis in orbit around the Sun. Astronomical winter. In 2022, astronomical winter began on December 21st and ended on March 20th, 2023. Winter 2024, Saturday 21st of December 2024, and it will end this year on March 20th. In winter of 2025, it'll begin on December 21st and end on the 20th of March in 2026. In winter of 2026, December 21st and March 20th of 2027, and the same one, 2027 is 22nd of December to March 20th, 2028. The astronomical calendar determines the seasons due to the 23.5 degrees of tilt of the Earth's rotational axis in relation to its orbit around the Sun. Both equinoxes and solstices are related to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. However, the dates of the equinox and solstice aren't fixed due to the Earth's elliptical orbit around the Sun. Meteorological winter. However, we often use a meteorological definition of the seasons. By the meteorological calendar, the first day of winter is always December 1st, ending on the 28th or 29th of February during a leap year. Meteorological seasons consist of splitting the seasons into 4 periods, made up of 3 months each. These seasons are split to coincide with our Gregorian calendar, making it easier for meteorological observing and forecasting to compare seasonal and monthly statistics. The seasons are defined as spring, March, April, May, summer, June, July, and August, autumn, September, October, and November, and winter, December, January, and February. Our next part is the factors that influence UK winters. There are many factors that influence the weather during the winter months in the UK, including the North Atlantic Oscillation. North Atlantic Oscillation. The North Atlantic Oscillation, or NAO, is the primary pattern of atmospheric circulation variability, the year-to-year change in the direction of the winds over the North Atlantic region. In its positive phase, lower than normal sea level pressure occurs near Iceland and higher than normal pressure over the Azores. This enhanced gradient in pressure strengthens the westerly winds from the Atlantic, bringing milder maritime air to the UK, but also increased rainfall and more windstorms. Conversely, in a negative phase, the pressure is higher than usual over Iceland and lower than usual over the Azores, weakening the pressure gradient and reducing the strength of the westerly winds. For the UK, this means that more of our weather will come from the north or east, which in winter means colder, drier, and potentially snowy conditions. The NAO can be affected by many external factors, a few of which I'm going to describe. 1. Polar vortex. A polar vortex is a circulation of winds high up in the stratosphere, up to 30 miles or 50 kilometers above the Earth. It is present in winter and is not a new phenomenon. Scientists have known about it for many years. The winds that regularly exceed 250 kilometers per hour. The strength of the winds in the strongest hurricanes, known as Category 5. During winter, the polar vortex can strengthen and weaken. These changes exert an influence lower down in the atmosphere and ultimately on our weather. Changes in the polar vortex can mean a change in NAO, and as a result, the weather in the UK. A prolonged spell with a weakened polar vortex typically favors negative NAO and colder weather. The next one, Arctic sea ice. The full extent of the influence of Arctic sea ice on the UK weather is still being researched. However, it is known that sea ice cover has a direct impact on atmospheric circulation patterns. The ice reflects sunlight back into the atmosphere, thereby helping maintain lower surface temperatures in the Arctic. Over the last 35 years, Arctic sea ice extent has declined in response to climate change at an average rate about 4% per decade over the year as a whole, or by more than 10% per decade looking at the summer alone. One of the main drivers of our weather is the temperature difference between the equator and the North Pole, which is in balance with the prevailing westerly winds. Cold European winters occur when the NAO is negative, and usually westerly winds weaken or even reverse. A reduction in the temperature difference between the equator and the North Pole due to decline in sea ice could potentially reduce the strength of the westerly winds, leading to greater occurrence of the negative NAO and an increased the risk of cold winters. However, warming could also cause air to rise over the Arctic. This would lead to lower surface pressure in that region, which would promote increased mid-latitude westerly winds and a positive NAO. This would correspond to a reduced risk of cold winters. The relative importance of these two competing effects is uncertain and hence is an area of an active research. Next and final one, tropical rainfall and our winter weather. Tropical rainfall is closely linked to the underlying ocean temperature. These temperatures are changed over weeks and months, much more slowly than our day-to-day weather. As a result, they can have big swings from one year to the next, due to events such as El Niño, which remaining relatively constant within an individual winter. Warm air rising in the tropics cools at height, causing wet water to condense into raindrops, which releases further heat into the atmosphere. It then floods outwards from the top of the tropical weather systems to return to the surface at the edge of the tropics. This high-level outflow of air can buckle the subtropical jet stream. This distortion can influence airflow to the north of the jet stream, spreading into the temperate mid-latitudes and creating weather patterns such as positive and negative NAO phases. Some of the high and low pressures areas created in this way can persist for months and have a dramatic effect on the winter weather in the UK. God, that was long. Our next one is 6 facts about the winter solstice. Number 1. The magic moment. While many focus on the winter solstice as a day in the calendar, what we are actually talking about is a very specific moment, which is over almost as soon as it had begun. The solstice marks the point at which the sun is exactly overhead the Tropic of Capricorn, which this year will happen on December 21st at 9:21. I think that was in 2022 or something. Number 2. The sun stands still. Like many other astronomical terms, the word solstice comes from Latin, owing to the sun appearing to stand still in the sky when it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn. The word solsticetum was used which in turn is composed of the words sol, meaning sun, and sistere, meaning standstill. Number 3. Winter begins. As well as marking the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice marks the first day of winter in the astronomical calendar. Whilst in the meteorological calendar, we are already 3 weeks into winter. Number 4. 9 hours darker. You're probably aware that the day of the winter solstice marks the shortest day of the year, but did you know that it's almost 9 hours shorter than the longest day of the year? The summer solstice in June is just short of 16 hours and 38 minutes long, while on the day of the winter solstice, the length of the day is a mere 7 hours and 50 minutes. Number 5. The earliest sunset. Logically, you'd expect the earliest sunset to fall on the shortest day, but the earliest sunset actually occurs a few days earlier in the calendar, and it's all to do with our clocks not quite mirroring the Earth's orbit. True solar noon, the point at which the sun reaches its highest point in the sky, occurs around 10 minutes earlier than when our clocks strike 12 o'clock. And it is this discrepancy, and it is this moment that means the sunset also arrives a little later on the solstice. Number 6. Solstice and Christmas. Amongst the many festivals that centre around the solstices and equinoxes, the Scandinavian festival of Jul has some rituals that are probably more familiar than you think. Probably more familiar to us as Yule, the 12-day festival centred around the solstice, has given birth to many of our most familiar Christmas traditions, including the Christmas tree, the Yule log, and the Christmas wreath. We'll have to do part 4 we'll have to do our final lesson in part 2.